With all the obscure card action we got going on over here, it's safe to say, my Animal Doctor career isn't happening anytime soon. Shocked that that was my backup plan. I like seals and shit. With all the obscure cards, I figured some obscure commanders were probably in order. So here's 10 fun obscure commanders and their decks. Let's get some ground rules out of the way. Fun is subjective, so meh. 2. An obscure commander to me is one with, under 1,000 decks on EDH Rec. And 3. The Rock cares not. And with that, we begin. Up first, we got the ever-changing Dane with 548 decks. I've talked about this card a couple other times on my channel, and I'm going to talk about it again because it's still super underplayed. This commander from Dominaria is an Esper commander. For one of each Esper color, you get a 3/3 shapeshifter, and you can pay one colorless to sack another creature. The ever-changing Dane becomes a copy of that creature, except it gains this ability. Yeah, this guy's way too underplayed. 548 decks on EDH Rec. This deck consists of running powerful creatures with powerful death triggers like Kaiga, the Tide Star, or Body Launderer to gain their death trigger and have ever-changing Dane become a copy of it, which is really good. This deck also has access to the 3 best removal colors, so plenty of protection for your ever-changing Dane. On top of that, you have access to black, which lets us use Feign Death cards, paired with us sacking creatures and becoming a copy of them. So imagine this line of play. I play a Kakusho, sacrificing it to the ever-changing Dane. Opponent loses 5, gain 15. Feign Death the Kakusho, it comes back. The legend rule makes you sacrifice the one that came back. They lose 5 again. You gain 15. You swing with your 5/5 Kusho flying copy that you have. That's a lot of damage. And you just gained a ton of life. Also, you can just replace this line of play with any of the Kamigawa dragons. So, whichever one's your favorite, go for it. Up next is Mizzix's Replica Rider with 281 decks. Mizzix's Replica Rider is an Izzet exile deck with a very fun ability and playstyle that's pretty unique. With only 281 decks on EDH Rec, which is kind of shocking, which I guess is why it's on the list. At 4 and a red, this 4/5 Flying Goblin Wizard, which are 2 really important creature types, allows us to pay 1 and a hybrid Izzet to copy a spell we've cast from anywhere other than our hand and choose a new copy. What's really cool is she can do permanents, so she's not just a Spellslinger deck. If it's a permanent, you copy it as a token, and it gains haste until end of turn, and you sack it at the end of your turn. If this was any other Izzet commander, it would not say permanent on it, so this is just very unique and cool. Shockingly low amount of decks. Everything you cast with your Commune with Lava, you can copy it. Yeah, sure. Or just run something like Wild Mage Sorcerer in this deck, and it's like, hey, all my stuff has Cascade, and it copies. Sorry. Seems really good. Up next, we've got Lucius the Eternal. I didn't even see this guy. 367 decks on EDH Rec. Lucius the Eternal is the most fitting name for a card I've ever seen, and is sitting at 367 decks on EDH Rec. This Rakdos commander costs 3, a black and a red for a 5/3. He's an Astari's warrior with haste, and when Lucius dies, exile it and choose a creature an opponent controls. When that creature leaves the battlefield, return Lucius to the battlefield. This dude works great with the, in addition to casting this spell, sack a creature spells, like Annihilation Glare or Eaten Alive, which allows us to sacrifice Lucius as a part of the cost, choosing the creature we're about to kill with Lucius's ability, and then kill the creature with the spell at a cheap cost, getting back Lucius. It's super good. Attrition seems like it would be an absolute house in this deck, just an enchantment that lets you sack a creature to destroy a creature. That's pretty good. Along with fling cards just being hilarious. Again, criminally underrated for how fun this looks. A lot of different ways you could go, and you're running a bunch of fun style cards, so. Corvold Gleeful Glutton's kind of interesting. 710 decks. He's on the higher end of this list, but still under 1,000 is kind of shocking for me. I figured this guy would be built like a ton. Corvold Gleeful Glutton is a Jund Dragon Noble commander with 710 decks on EDH Rec. Corvold is 5, a black, a red, and a green, but he reduces his cost by 1 for each permanent type you've sacrificed this turn. Coming out as a 4/4 Flying Trample Haste, whenever Corvold deals combat damage to a player, put X/1/1 counters on him and draw X cards, where X is the number of permanent types among permanents in your graveyard. Yeah. Treasures. Clues. Blood. Food. Sorry, I got a nasty cough. On top of that, there's a ton of creatures, enchantments, artifacts, and lands that just crack themselves for value, make him cost less, make you draw more cards because they're in their graveyard now. They're in your graveyard now. He's a big, scary dragon. And I know 710 decks, that's not a small amount of decks. But this definitely reads like it's a plus 1,000er. This just seems fun as hell. Yeah, go do it. I like him. Katsumasa the Animator is next with 350 decks. Katsumasa! Katsumasa the Animator is a mono blue artifact deck with a very unique playstyle. With 350 decks on EDH Rec, this Moonfolk Artificer costs 2 and 2 blue for a 3/3 flying. You can pay 2 and a blue until end of turn. Target non-creature artifact you control becomes an artifact creature and gains flying. If it's not a vehicle, its power and toughness are 1/1. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 3 non-creature artifacts. Now, clearly, vehicles seem pretty okay, being able to animate them instead of crew them, but I really like this guy with, like, budget-efficient artifacts like Wellsprings, you know, that draw you a card or get you a mana when they enter or die, get their early game value, turn them into mid to late game threats with Katsumasa's +1/+1 and animation ability. If the threats get handled, you just get their death triggers. On top of vehicles and baubles, running the classic artifact interaction like Ethereum Sculptor and Emery Lurker of the Lock to just, like, spam out artifacts, get them back if they're dealt with, animate them, make them bigger, repeat. Pretty good. Drina, Dauntless General, is an Orzhov commander that's honestly more annoying than fun, which is a reoccurring theme with Orzhov commanders. But it has 70 freaking decks, so we'll go over it. Drina is a 2/2 human soldier for 1 and a black. When she enters the battlefield, exile target player's graveyard, sacrifice Drina, humans you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. On top of being a graveyard hate bear, you know, just hosing a graveyard deck when she enters, she is great protection for a wide human board state. You know, if someone does a board wipe, someone tries to remove something, she protects it very well. On top of that, pairing your own board wipe with her ability, you know, makes your board stay and then wipe everybody else's, which is a super good line of play to win. Going even deeper into this, throwing in some of those Feign Death cards would be super good because you could crack her, make your board indestructible, Feign Death her so she comes back. On top of all this annoying shit you could be doing, you also just have like a normal default human list, which has gotten a ton of support with stuff like Coppercoat Vanguard or Thalia's Lieutenant. So, you know, this deck just seems very annoying, resilient. Pretty good. Up next, we've got Huatli, Poet of Unity with 567 decks. Huatli, Poet of Unity is another typal commander to make this list with 567 decks on EDH Rec, which should say something because, you know, I really don't like typal decks really all that much, but she seems actually kind of fun. Huatli is 2 and a green for a 2/3 human warrior bard. When she enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card and put it into your hand, then shuffle. For 3 and 2 hybrid Boros, you can exile and return Huatli transformed into Roar of the Fifth People, a saga whose first chapter gives us 2 2/2 green dinos. Second chapter lets our creatures tap for Naya colors, which is actually pretty good. Chapter 3 tutors us up a dino from our deck, you know, which it's good in a dinosaur deck, I'm sure. While the final chapter gives our dinos double strike and trample, you know, which will end a game. This chick is mana fixing, mana ramp, board filling, a tutor, and a win con stapled onto your commander, you know. Run your Gishaths and your Zakamas, whatever your weird dino stuff is, and have a blast. This seems real good. Hannah Ship's Navigator's up next. This one's an old school classic that has no love because it's only got 472 decks. Hannah Ship's Navigator is an old commander originally printed in Invasion, but reprinted recently that I feel has really fallen through the cracks over the years. With 472 decks on EDH Rec, for 1, a white and a blue, Hannah is a 1/2 human artificer. Pay 1, a white and a blue, tap her, return target artifact or enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. She seems really fun, and she has a ton of support now, you know, with the inclusions of sagas. You know, they seem pretty good. Not to even mention the powerful ones that just came out in the Doctor Who set, like Trial of a Time Lord, and new really good vehicles that we've gotten, like Night Paladin, that Hannah can crew and then bring back if dealt with, which is really cool. On top of just tons of really good cards for her deck, like Oswald Fiddlebender, the Reality Chip. This seems like a really solid one, actually. Hansk Slayer Zealot. What a strange name. Hansk. Interesting. 407 decks. Hansk is the actual magic skin of like the Daryl Dixon card that came out. So that might be the explanation for why it's in so little decks. For 2, a red and a green, we get a 4/4 human archer. At the beginning of our upkeep, target opponent creates 3 2/2 black zombie tokens. Tap Hansk, deal 2 damage to any creature. Whenever a zombie an opponent controls dies, draw a card. This is super interesting play. This is a super interesting play style that's actually really good. Slightly political, as you get to pick who gets zombies. Also a bit group huggy, as you could just be giving them to everybody. Hansk dealing 2 to a creature is great because we can deal with some of the zombies and get a card draw, as well as like 1,000-Year Elixir in this deck, so you can get 2 Hansk triggers or activations. Seems really good. But what I thought is like Anger of the Gods and stuff like that does 2 damage to everybody's board, because Hansk will live it, all of his zombies won't, and then you'll draw a ton of cards for 3 mana. This actually is probably going to be one I build. This looks very fun. Or you can just run mass goad cards like Disrupt Decorum and just have opponents swinging at each other with zombies that draw you cards if they die. It's pretty good. And finally, we've got Garzazal Plague Queen with 82 decks. Garzazal is a Grixis commander coming in at 4 colorless, a blue, a black, and a red for a 5/5 flying. She's a vampire, and whenever a creature dealt damage by Garzazal dies, put a 1/1 counter on Garzazal. And when she deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card. Her deck is honestly just a vampire deck. If you look it up on EDHREC, that's all it recommends you, but I disagree. I'm going to be honest. There's one big reason this deck seems really fun, and that's because of this deck's best card for me, and that's Chandra's Ignition. Target this with Chandra's Ignition, wipe most of the board, even if it's a 5/5. Wipe most of the board for 5, deal 5 to each opponent, put a +1/+1 counter on her for each creature that died because Chandra's Ignition makes the creature deal the damage. Have a huge flying vampire beater, and, you know, that's not even it because this is where it gets really scary. The fact we're in Grixis, we have access to Izzet, so we have pretty much all of the copy target instant or sorcery shenanigans, so, you know, you play that on your Chandra's Ignition, and then the copy targets the way bigger Garza. Or the original Chandra's Ignition targets the way bigger Garza, and then it does a lot more damage to each opponent. The creatures are already gone, but you're going to be dealing a good 10 to 15 plus damage on the 5 you already did. You can do upwards of 20 plus damage with Chandra's Ignition and Garza, and that's if there's a small to medium amount of creatures on the board. If you're against a token deck, you could probably kill everybody, which is really good. And on that same note, I'm sure there's a play pattern and a way to build this deck that's built around cards kind of like that, where this could get really scary. Outside of that, she's just a high-costed Voltron commander. You'll need to protect her, but you're in Grixis, so you got plenty of protection to do that. Again, you can run the Death Defy cards if you don't want to waste mana on her. If someone deals with her, you can get her back. Go ahead and comment which deck you'd play if you had to pick one. Any deck ideas you've come up with, you know, they're all welcome. Also, the Discord is open to everybody, so link in the description if you guys want to join that. Thank you guys for the support. Also, there's some really exciting stuff coming up this year for the channel, so please stay with us. Much love. Appreciate you guys, and go play some Magic.